welcome to Positive Parenthood. I'm here today with Robin.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you again tonight.
And we're going to talk tonight about mealtime, specifically dinner time, but some people, like whether you do use the Positive Parenthood method at dinner time or at breakfast time, we all know that for most of us, meal times are really, chaotic, challenging, times when kids lose it, cry, don't do what they're supposed to do, run around the table, whatever it is. So we're going to talk about that. I'll just share a little bit while we wait for people to get on about what my mealtime, which I had right before we came to do this video, was like this evening. And I think that if you at all relate to the story that I'm about to tell you, then it's likely that this will be helpful. Robin's going to share some tips and tricks that you can put into practice at your next mealtime. So tomorrow morning for breakfast or for lunch or whenever it is that you're sitting down with your little ones to have some food. So tonight, my husband is working and I was starting dinner. We were having an early dinner so I could come here and do this. His name is Sam and he was getting home. He was kind of home late. So I was like already sort of like chaotic. The kids were like naked and playing in the water outside and I was trying to get dinner ready. And they were getting hungry and so they were getting kind of cranky. And he came home and then he started playing with them and I got everything on the table. And then they didn't want to come eat dinner because he was playing with them. But we had to eat because I was going to leave to come here. And let us know. Hi, I see some people have just jumped on. Let us know who you are. You can drop a comment over on the side and that will let us know who's here. So we finally got all the kids at the table and then one of them got really upset because they had the wrong water cup. So then we ensued a search for the pink water cup. But even when we found the pink water cup, she was already screaming and crying. And it was already this big deal, right? So then I had to read her a book in the middle of dinner to get her to calm down about the pink water cup. So she finally calmed down. So we all finally get around the table and there's up and down because we spill something. And then the other child wants a yellow fork and there's only a green fork. So we have to find the yellow fork and wash it. And then, it goes on and on and on, right? I've also had times and heard from other families that there's issues with kids who don't want to sit in their chair and run around the table. Or I have one of my kids in particular, sometimes only wants to eat one piece of dinner or nothing. She would I'm you could have this, you could have pasta, you could have that, you could have this other thing. And she won't. She doesn't want to have anything on her plate. So I think for many of us, mealtimes are generally chaotic, and that's what we're here talking about tonight. So Mom, thinking about the story that I just shared, maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about what you think is going on and how you think the kids perceive that kind of environment, what's happening for kids in that sort of moment.
Yeah, thank you so much. So it's a great story, and it's one that I've seen over and over and over again, not just in Chelsea's household, but in many households. And we've seen videos of families at dinner. And I think there's a couple of things going on. The first thing is that to start the dinner meal, the kids are outside doing something fun that's active. They're moving around. They're having a great time. I don't know if they were dancing or singing outside in the yard with their dad. And so then the idea of leaving that very fun activity and coming in to eat dinner is what we would call a transition. And as parents, we think transitions should be smooth and easy and just happen automatically. But the reality is that for kids, transitions are hard. And so we have to plan for transitions, and we have to plan for transitions in a way that takes into account that coming to dinner is going to be less preferred than playing outside. So what actually could have happened that might have helped was that Sam, the dad, could have helped the three girls transition in as Chelsea was cooking, and one of their jobs could be setting the table. By doing that in advance, we would have found out that the one little girl wanted the pink cup. It could have been discovered well in advance and be on the table ready to go. So one of the biggest challenges for most families is that parents want their kids to come in and eat, but the table's not really set. And so if kids do come in and eat, which it sounds like they got the girls inside to eat, the table's not ready from their perspective. And so that becomes then even more chaos. So we're adding chaos on top of chaos. And so really thinking about how do we get the table ready before the kids are sitting down, and they can become very easily part of that routine. And by becoming part of that routine, they learn that there are jobs that have to be done. So we set the table, we make sure everybody has water, we make sure everybody has a fork, and if the one child is setting the table, she can actually ask her sister, would you like a yellow fork or a green fork, if we know that's an issue. And so then when we do sit down, everybody should sit down together, and there should be no more ups and downs from the table. So the parents shouldn't be dashing out to go find the pink cup or getting up to get the green spoon. Everybody should be seated and staying seated at the table. And that way the parents serve as the anchors, and anchoring at the table is really important for our kids. The other piece that you brought up, Chelsea, is what to do with that child who really only wants one thing on her plate. And so what I would say, unless your child has a medically based reason for you to push food on them, what I would encourage you to do is to serve food family style, and we can teach your kids to tell us directly, yes, I want some noodles, or no, I don't want noodles. So if we say, would you like some pasta? And she says, no, thank you. I say, okay, no pasta. So in the end, it may look like she has nothing on her plate, but by not making that a battleground, it invites the child to let us know when she's hungry and to choose the food that she wants to eat.
Okay, so let's just back up a little bit.
There was a lot there.
My kids are 3, 3, and 1.5. So one of the things you said was that they should be helping to set the table or to get everything ready, so like regular fork and regular cup and like all of these items. But I can't really imagine them being able to participate in that. Like sometimes I'm like, here, you want to put this on the table, but it doesn't make it, or they say no. Like, how am I supposed to get my really young children to participate in table setting?
So I like that. And I've had so many families that have had that experience. And if we make that the routine is that every night we set the table. And I can say, do you want to put the cups on the table or the forks on the table? And by my excitement, or in this case, Sam's excitement for setting the table, it can't be the parent who's rushing around making dinner, because you don't have the patience and the child knows it in that moment. So they can say no, and it gets you a little aggravated, and then the forks aren't going on the table. But if Sam, as delightful as he was being outside in the yard dancing with the girls, if instead they could be just that excited to put the forks on the table, I absolutely think you can have your kids help. And even the 1.5-year-old can help to put one fork on the table.
So what do you do if there's only one parent around? What if, because a lot of times I think there's a lot of single parents, and there's also just a lot of times that one parent is working or out late or whatever the situation is. And how would you manage that with only one adult?
And 3 children?
2 or 3 children.
2 or 3 children.
Some children, more than an adult.
Yes, that's a reality that does happen for some families. And what I would say is that the parent needs to find a way to occupy the children that's not too lovely. So I wouldn't put them on a screen. It could be that they're playing with blocks, whatever. Meanwhile, that one parent is setting the table, getting everything ready, having the food on the table ready to go. And you can decide if you have a cooperative child that you think would be relatively easily agreeable to supporting you. Wonderful. If not, I would say go ahead and put it on, because at this point I want it to be about the transition to the table, since there's only one of you. So once the table is fully set, all the right items are on the table, then I would go to the 3 girls that are playing on the floor, and I would work on the transition away from whatever they were currently doing. So that would be a moment where I would say, all right, it's time to clean up our blocks, or clean up our dolls, or clean up our Legos, and make that a delightful activity. As soon as that's cleaned up, then I'm going to say, and now it's time for dinner. Here we go. And I might even use that kind of sing-song animation in my voice, because that helps the child know every time, this is the way you move to the table, and it's wonderful. If that was the case, I would want the children at a minimum to put their plates away, so that at the end of the meal, they know that they put their plates into the sink.
So how would you have them put their plates into the sink? Because like my kids like to eat after their bath. They like to come back and eat more, or sometimes there's like soup on a thing, but they will definitely spill when they're walking over to the sink. Or I'm like, you need to put your plates away, and they just don't. They say no.
Okay, so you have to be ready. So the first one that you notice is almost done. You have to help them take their plate and go to the sink. And I might actually say, oh, this is the way we hold our plate. And we walk over to the sink and we put it here. We do want our kids to know that mealtime has a definite beginning and a definite ending so that we don't just keep on eating through the night. So I would help your kids know that we stay at the table until dinner time is finished. When you're finished eating, then we take our plate up. But it doesn't expand through bath time and then just until bedtime. Very many kids will enjoy a snack before bed, but really dinner should be eaten at dinner time.
Mm-hmm. So basically, this is an appropriate thing for kids who are toddlers to be able to participate in.
Absolutely.
What about kids with special needs? Can you talk about how would you do that for a kid who needs more support?
I had a wonderful family that came through this program many years ago, and at the time, the family had 3 children. They had I think she was 6, and then they had a 4-year-old child with autism, and then they had a 3-year-old little brother, typically developing. So 2 with typical development, 1 with autism. And at the beginning, we all watched their videotapes week to week thinking, oh my gosh, is this ever going to happen? But the routine of these families every single night, having their kids put the dishes away, at that point in time, the oldest daughter had to help with washing the dishes and loading them into the dishwasher. By the end of the 12 weeks, it was beautiful. It was like a well-orchestrated symphony where each of the children knew their parts, they knew what they were supposed to do, and they did them because they understood the expectation. So sometimes when kids don't do it, or they give us a little grief, it's because we're not consistent as the adult support team. Because many of your children do put their items away when they're in a school setting. And the reason is because the teacher is able to dedicate her time and energy and her knowledge to knowing, yeah, that's what you do. You put your things away. And at home, we get caught up in all the different activities, so it's a little trickier. But we can do it. We can still help our kids know the routine.
Okay. So I want to talk in a minute about food and what to do with a kid who really won't eat. And you touched on that a little bit before. But before we get there, maybe we can talk about staying at the table. There have been a couple of questions about how to get kids to stay at the table. Whether that's like, I want to get up and go play, or I just like want to run around, or I'm eating like a cat and I'm going to eat on the floor.
Okay. So fun things, right? Kids are so very, very creative and imaginative. So the first thing I would say is one of the things we talk about in the positive parenthood tools is we talk about how do you set rules that work. And first thing you would want to do with your children is set the rule and what's the expectation. So if the expectation is mealtime is a time when all the family members sit down and eat together, that means everybody sits down and eat together. And it's a lovely thing to do, but it means the adults have to sit down and stay as well. Because if we model for our children that getting up and down, popping up and down, oh, I just heard my phone go off, let me go answer it, then we're showing them how to get up and down. So if really what we want our kids to do is to stay, we might say the rule at our house is we stay at the table and maybe you would decide until everybody's finished. And if you finish first, that's okay. Then we can just sit here. Or maybe the rule at our house, and this is what each family has to decide for themselves, the rule at our house is we stay at the table until we're done eating dinner. And in that case, if your child is finished before everybody else, he stands up and he puts his plate in the sink. That signals he or she is finished, and then it's okay for them to run around the table or to play with toys. But really we have to decide, each family has to decide what is the rule. A rule I would get into with your children is I wouldn't force a child to eat a certain food or to eat a certain quantity. We really need to give our kids the right to determine how much and what food they want to eat, but we can determine what happens to the plate afterwards. And that's where, from a child development perspective, we're thinking how critical it is for kids to learn routines. And the routine we want your children to learn is that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you put your plate away, that signals the end. And because the child put the plate away, he knows now that dinner is done.
Okay, so I get that we want them to learn routines and that I want them to have the right to choose what they're going to eat, but I also feel like my kids need to eat some dinner. And I have one child, and I know other people have this issue too, who literally will be like, I don't want any of the thing. If I serve it family style, they'll be like, I don't want that, I don't want that, and I don't want that. So then what am I supposed to do? Do I offer them something else? Like if they don't have to eat any of the stuff on the table, do I say like, do you want PB&J or do you want something else? Or like then what happens if they don't want anything?
Well, that again is a family and a life choice, right? I definitely have had families come through the program that in their family, they're okay with cooking an alternative. If that's okay with you as a family, that's certainly a choice you could make. Other families decide that, no, I don't want to be a short order cook. My goal is this is the meal and this is what we eat. And if that's the case in your family, that's the rule. Oh, these are the things we have tonight. You can decide if you want to eat them or maybe you're not too hungry. And that's absolutely a choice as well. We want to offer that to our children. And I know, it's funny, Chelsea joined me here in my office today and I asked her if the dinner she had made was good or not. And she said, no, I wasn't hungry. I didn't eat yet. So it's really interesting that we're thinking about forcing food on our children when they might not be hungry. And yet she took the privilege as an adult tonight to decide she wasn't hungry. And I think sometimes we have to say, okay, the rule is we sit at the table. If you're hungry, you eat something, but I'm not going to force you to eat something. I'm going to allow the child to make that choice.
And would you allow a child who's 2 or a child who's 10 or a child who's 16, all ages, to make that choice?
I would.
And if they don't eat anything, then what happens? Like, so say they don't eat anything, they said they weren't hungry. They have the rest of their evening routine, and then they're hungry right before bedtime.
Of course, because they didn't eat.
Right.
So you have to decide. Again, you have to have a rule in your house, right? And so as a family, you can decide what that rule is. Perhaps if the child eats nothing, your rule is, you can still have your dinner, right? That might be the rule. What I don't like to see is the rule where if you eat your dinner, you can have dessert. So we don't want to reinforce eating with a sugary food. That's not a good plan. Or you might say, I know you didn't like your dinner tonight. That's okay. You can always have an apple for a snack. And so then I can choose what that preferred item is going to be at the end of the day. It's not going to be a sugary food. And as you know, Chelsea, that was your brother. Kalen was that way for many years. He would go, a couple of days literally without eating. And the rule in our house was you got one piece of fruit. If you didn't eat your dinner, no problem. Our rule was you had to stay at the table until everybody was done. And then if you didn't eat your dinner, you could have a piece of fruit before you went to bed. So,
yeah. Okay. So what about like today our kids went to school, and so when we were at dinner, we're like, and one of them was the line leader. And so when we were at dinner, we're like asking them how was school? How, how was your day? What did you do today? And they just said like, fine, good, fun, or they don't say anything. And so I'm just wondering, I know we're supposed to engage our kids during the dinner time, but I'm not sure how to engage them because they just say fine or good or fun or nothing when I ask them how school was.
Okay. So thinking about it from the perspective of young children, and I'll take your children because there's two 3-year-olds and an 18-month-old. And so we want to think about, well, how do we support our children in talking with us at mealtime? And you're trying to talk to them about something that happened earlier in their day, and they can no longer see it or think about it. What they can see in front of them is dinner. So I'd encourage you to talk to them about what you're doing in that moment, which is what we would call in the here and now. So I would talk to them about dinner. Ooh, I really like this chicken tonight. And then I would wait for them to say something back. So talking to them about what they can see is going to support them in having a conversation with you. Most kids, special needs or not, if you ask them how their day was, at best you'll get a fine. Once in a while you'll get a little bit more than that, but that's about all that they can do. And in fact, if I said to you, Chelsea, how was your day today? You might say to me, fine. Right? That's kind of a natural response. And so we really have to allow kids to organically come up with things that are interesting to them. And when I don't have that happen, I'm going to talk about what we're doing. So what's happening in that moment as a way to engage a young child.
Okay, so what if they're a little bit older, then I'm still talking to them about the chicken?
You might be, yeah. You might be talking to them about the chicken, or you might be talking to them about something that's upcoming. So if they're a little bit older and they can talk about things that are coming up and have a conversation about those things, lovely. Most kids aren't going to go back and recite through their day something that happened. Although sometimes a parent can say, wow, I had the best PB&J for dinner, for lunch today. And then your child might respond to that and say, well, I didn't have PB&J, I had roast beef, right? So you might get something in that fashion, but it's always better to allow the child to lead the conversation. And if the child doesn't lead, then I would talk about what's in front of us.
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about with my kids, but like that's all we can talk about because I also like my husband is also there and maybe we want to have a conversation about what our days was like.
Okay, and you might, and again, we're thinking about, you said you wanted to engage with your young children. So just think about the level of language for you and your husband is going to be a lot different than for your 3 children. And so to keep them engaged, you're going to have to go to a lower level. Excuse me.
So what would that look like?
So that might look like you talking about just the very basics of what's on the table in that moment and holding the adult conversation for later.
Okay, so we should really just be focusing on what we're eating and or things I can see.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I guess we can try that. It's a little bit hard for me to imagine it working, but I guess we can try it. Can you talk about,
Let me get my water.
in just a minute, I'm going to ask her to talk about what kinds of mealtime chores are like different aged kids can do. So like I am going to have my toddlers and I'll let you know in the comments over the next couple of days how it goes. I'm going to have them take their plates and cups to the table. I think that seems manageable for their age. And I wonder if you can talk about what would be manageable for kids that are like in elementary school or upper elementary school and then middle school and high school.
I would say from preschool age and beyond, kids should be fully part of the routine of meal prep and meal cleanup. So I'd want them to be involved from the beginning. As they get older, you might have nights of rotation. So later elementary and high school, there's going to be a lot of homework. So if I know that homework is especially intense on one night, maybe that's the night they have free and that's the night that I'm on. So we can rotate the chores, but what's going to be really important is that they learn from an early age that you're part of the family, and as part of the family, you're responsible for helping.
Okay. So do you do like a chart with like a list of chores and everybody has to do their chore or like their part in getting the dinner ready or the meal?
That's one way, and certainly that's something that I know that some families have done, and they rotate those things. Sometimes charts fall by the wayside over time, and so what I'd really suggest is that every night everybody's involved, and so maybe one does cups, one does spoons, one does plates. And so we really keep everyone in the mix on a consistent basis so that they know, oh, mom's cooking dinner, I need to set the table. And that it's just part of the expectation. The more things that we can bring into automaticity so the child knows that that's his role and that's what he has to do, the better off it's going to be.
Awesome. Okay. So I will try this over the next week and I'll report back in the comments. And I hope that those of you who are on tonight and or those of you who catch the replay will also report back in the comments. Jessica, we'd love to hear what you would like to do with your kids and how it goes over the next couple of days, and also anyone else who's on here. I can't quite see all of the names if we're not Facebook friends. Whoever else is on, we would also love to hear how it goes for you. You can just drop a comment over the next couple of days below this video. Before we close up, is there anything else you would say would be like the main takeaway or the main 2 or 3 takeaways that you would want people to remember about mealtime?
Yep. The first takeaway is always be prepared. So have everything set up, ready to go. so that it's easy for your kids to participate. So that might involve putting 5, for their family, 5 forks in a little basket, and that child takes her basket and sets them out on the table. Another thing is to don't invite the children to the table until the food is on the table, so that it's ready to go when you actually sit down. Adults have to sit down too, and make mealtime a low stress, enjoyable moment just to be together as a family, and conversation will come. We don't want it to be a time where children feel like, oh my gosh, I have to eat this much food. That should not be what mealtime is about. Unless your child has a medical reason for you pushing food, I would really encourage you to let the children follow their own needs there. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you. So I will let you know how it goes for me. I'd love to hear how it goes for you, and we'll be posting some examples and some of the recommendations that we've had today over the next couple of days. I also want to remind you that the Positive Parenthood community is now live. And what that means is that you get access to all of the Positive Parenthood tools in the members only area of the website. So Robin has made a video for each tool, and you'll some of them will be useful and some of them won't be, or they might be useful in different ways or at different times, but you would have access to all of those. And you also get access to our private members only Facebook group. If you are interested in signing up for that, it's $29.99. Sorry, I'm putting my elbows on the table and it's shaking. If you're interested in signing up for that, please just drop a comment that says I'm interested in the comments, and I'll get in touch with you and let you know how to do it. It's $29.99 a month. We are also enrolling for the online and the in-person class. The in-person class will be in Lafayette or Walnut Creek beginning in January, and the online course will also begin in January. So if any of that interests you, please just write I'm interested in one of the comments, and I'll be in touch with a personal message about what the next steps are. Please follow us here on Facebook and also on Instagram at Positive Parenthood Community. Yeah, it's been really great to talk with you guys tonight.
Thanks
for your time. Take care.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.